If you're interested in woodland photography and you've always struggled and how to compose your images within the woods and the forests, this is the video for you. My name is Julian Elliott and I am a professional landscape and travel photographer. If you want to keep up with my exploits as a professional landscape and travel photographer, make sure you click on the subscribe button just down there. The absolute first step when it comes to woodland photography is to go to somewhere that you know and that you can practice. Why? Because you know it. And if you're familiar with your surroundings, like this woodland here, which is about 5 minutes drive from where I live in France, then you're going to be able to create more successful images from that particular area, and also you'll get to know the intricacies of this particular woodland. So for me, for example, I know when it rains heavily, where I'm stood floods, and I've had images, I think it was back in April or so, whereby this whole area was flooded. I had a really nice sunny day with blue sky, white fluffy clouds, and I was able to get the reflections all in this woodland, plus the reflections of all the tree stumps here. So that is the first step to creating your successful images within woodland. Get to know one of your local areas. The next step to think about when creating your woodland images is the light and the quality of the light. Woodland is great in that it works both in flat light and also sunny light, and also when you have that low mist and there is the sun breaking through the mist in the early morning, creating those really nice ethereal looking images. Absolutely wonderful soft light in the morning. You can't beat it. So as I said, it works great in flat light. Today we have flat light. It's a very overcast day, there's no long shadows anywhere, and it pretty much works, as you will see, not necessarily here, but certainly in the next location that we'll be working on further on into the video. So that's the next step you must think about, is light, the quality of the light in your woodland. Once you've got to know your local woodland and you've thought about the quality of the light that you want in that woodland, the next step to think about is lens choice. Obviously we have wide angle, 50mm, short telephoto, long telephoto. Each of those lenses will work in a particular area of woodland. Wide angle, for example, is great if you've got some foreground interest. We don't really have any foreground interest in this particular woodland. So the next step up is to think about, is it somewhere around 35-50mm that we're going to work in. Here, because I visit it very often, I know that around 50mm and above works. Why? Because it helps to compress a lot of the trees together and create a very nice composition. Telephoto, it kind of works in here, but it brings things maybe too close. So here, for example, I'm always thinking it's around 50-70mm. So 50mm, how our eye see, and then 70mm, so it starts to compress things just a little, but not too much. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a picture, the same composition, and show you why each of them does and doesn't work, so you can see what it is that I'm talking about here in this particular woodland. I've set up my camera and I've put on a zoom lens which is 28mm to 70mm. And that's because it gives me most of the focal lengths that I would use in this particular woodland. Specifically for me, 50mm and 70mm. At the moment it's set at 28, and you can see it's okay. It's probably maybe a little bit too wide. But what I've done is I put this central trunk here in the middle, as this is what I really want to focus on. And you can see on the thirds here, there is actually a trunk and a trunk as well. And the foreground is maybe just off the bottom of the third and going towards the middle, but not quite. But it's just too wide, and especially on a day like today, there's nothing in the sky and it's just white and it's going to be blown out. So that's 28mm wide angle, and that for me is why this particular scene doesn't work at wide angle. If I turn live view back on again and I go into 50mm, you will see, if I slightly adjust my composition just a little bit, just around here, that things start to become more compressed. These trunks in the background are becoming more prominent, whereas they were quite far away because of the wide angle of the lens. So they're starting to become a lot more compressed into the scene, and it's how we see it with our eyes, as our eyes see around 50mm focal length. So you can see that on the third, we've got these trunks here, so they're starting to come in nicely. The foreground is dropping down just a touch. We're losing the sky, so we're losing the emphasis on what's going to be an overexposed sky. Things are starting to look that lot nicer. Let's go in just a little bit more. So if I go to roughly here, and what I'm doing, if I just turn live view back on, I'm paying very close attention to these corners here. So this here, this branch, this trunk here is frustrating for me, so I'm zooming in just to remove it from the frame. Then I'm going to push this down just a little bit, and then what you'll see is that we have an image that's starting to look a lot more composed and a lot more organized, and we're starting to see the wood for the trees. So if I take that image, then you'll see the difference between this image and the wide angle image, and how using 50mm and longer in the woodland can help emphasize those tree trunks, bring things closer together, compress them, and help to create a more balanced image. As I said, you can use wide angle, but I think you'll find a lot of the time you're probably working 35mm and up, where you're starting to get more of an emphasis on bringing things together and creating a more balanced image. For the composition of our images, it's good to start somewhere like this. And the reason is because it's an orderly wood. It's actually a man-made wood. Everything's been planted in an orderly fashion, and so you can work things out a lot quicker than if you were to go in just to a woodland, in your local woodland that's been there for hundreds of years. Because everything's planted, we can start to find compositions a lot easier, and then we can take that knowledge and transport it into a normal woodland that's been there for hundreds of years and is just a tangle of branches, trees, trunks and whatever else. So I'll just explain some of the compositions that you can do here in this particular type of woodland, and so you can get an idea how we're going to transport it back into a proper woodland and that's been there for a few hundred years or so. This is the first type of composition that you could do in this managed woodland. You can use the avenue here and here to create a line of interest going in and in to go back towards here. The only slight problem with this is there isn't really anything back here to create any interest. There is some moss or something up there in the tree. I think it might be mistletoe back there. It's lying on that third. Detail wise, what I am looking at, and I might do in a bit, is just here there's a huge mushroom which I might go and take a shot of. It looks quite interesting, but that's the kind of first kind of composition that you could do here in this managed woodland. This is another example of a composition that you could do here in this managed woodland. It's similar-ish to when I was demonstrating the focal length, in that the tree trunk is in the middle and other things start dropping in behind it. However, this time the grass is more along the top third, but it's another example of something that you could do here in this managed woodland when you're starting to see the wood for the trees. Hopefully you've seen in this managed woodland how I started to create compositional elements to be able to bring some kind of order into a final image. So what I'm going to do from here is decamp into an ancient woodland, and we're going to see how we can manage that and bring some kind of order to the chaos of an ancient woodland. So we've swapped managed woodland for chaos. Ancient woodland, where do you look? Well, if you take some of those elements of composition, like the rule of thirds, or like the managed woodland where we place the tree trunk in the middle, if you start to look around and start positioning yourself with the tree trunk here or here, and just move. So when you move here, you'll see behind in the background that the other trees move. Try to position things in such a way that you order the chaos of this ancient woodland. So I found something. It's taken me about 15 minutes or so just wandering around in here just to have a look, see what it is that I could find, and I've started to pick things up. I've never actually walked in this woodland. I've driven past it many times. It's only like 5 minutes from my house, but I'm taking the time today just to have a look, see what's here, and see what I can do with the chaos of this ancient woodland. As a first composition and the first time here, this is something that I've found, just wandering around, as I said, to see what it is that I could come up with. So I've placed this tree here, it's kind of on the third, but not really, it's actually off the third itself. And then I've placed the foreground, so it's just up shy of the middle, and then there's the colour here in the background from all the autumn leaves. As well as that, I started to try and make some sense of the background. So I've used a corner up here for one of the branches that's going off, and up here as well. It could possibly be just adjusted slightly there, and the very simple reason is, so I've got this branch going up in this corner here, and also here I'm creating some separation which I didn't have before, so that it's not just the tree trunk in the corner here, there's actually some colour going here. So you've got these bands of colour and the tree trunks themselves. Down here you have this new tree that's growing up, which is creating interest on the third. So that's the first composition that I've done here. I just take a snap, and then you can see when the image pops up in a minute how that looked when we were here in this part of the woodland. Let's move on to something else and to show you how to bring more order to the chaos that you see in front of you. There's two more elements that I want to add in to composition within your image. The first is leading lines, and as you can see that's running through me, there's this path that's probably just been created by animals such as deer and boar that we get here in central France. They've created a pathway through the woodland, and that is another compositional element that you can add in. Leading lines will always take your viewer from the edge and bring them into the image. Let them look around and let them explore. The next thing that I want to talk about, and it's extremely important in woodland, is a polarizing filter. And what that does is it removes any glare from the leaves. So yesterday it was raining a lot here, so there's a lot of water on the ground, a lot of water on the leaves in the trees. That polarizer filter is going to cut through the glare and be able to add in more saturation to the image. So I'll just show you what it is that I've set up at the moment to give you an idea of how it is that I'm looking at this scene and what you might be able to take away from it and to be able to put into your own images. This is the image that I've set up. I saw this path here while I was walking along the main path. It's not the main path, obviously. As I said, it looks like it's been made by animals, as it's indistinct, but it's distinct enough to give us an idea of a compositional element. And as you can see, I've started to arrange things here. So this tree here, the trunk is on the bottom third there, which is going out and then up to the top. I've cut out a lot of the sky as it's distracting, and I've just started to arrange everything else. So I've made sure that there's no trunks that are intruding on the edges here of the frame, and there's no unwanted elements there at the top. So that for me, it starts to create some order again out of the chaos that we have here in the woodland. And also, as I said, there's a polarizer on the front, which is taking the glare away from the water that's on the leaves that was from the fallen rain yesterday. So that's helping to saturate the image a lot more than it is. So I take a photo with this polarizer and without the polarizer, so you can see the difference and why it is that you should actually make sure you have that polarizer with you and that it's not just for those blue sky days. For this last sequence on woodland photography, I want to use a blue sky day combined with the colour in the trees to help enhance the composition, because very often all we hear about is the rule of thirds, leading lines, S-curves, all these kind of things in composition, but we never really hear about colour. So if you look at a colour wheel, you'll see that yellow and blue are near to one another on the colour wheel, thus they complement one another in any composition that you might choose to use them in. The other thing that I'm going to do is I've changed my lens to a wide angle lens. So here I've got a Canon 17 to 40mm lens, so it's very, very wide angle of view. And when I look up, which is the last thing that I want to do, is actually going to help the trees loom in above me while looking up at the blue sky and the golden colours of the yellow leaves up there, or the autumn colour. So let's take a shot and then see what it is that I'm doing with that shot. So what am I doing when I'm looking up at those trees, trying to get an image that pleases me? Well, the first thing that I do is I put my camera in aperture priority, and that's very simple. The only reason I'm doing that is just to take a few things off my mind when I'm composing my image handheld. In aperture priority, I'm then adding in around 1 stop of exposure compensation just to open things up a bit. The 6D has enough exposure latitude that I know it will give me what I want for around 2/3 of a stop, or a stop over the middle point on your exposure meter. The next thing that I'm doing is I'm enabling the back button focusing on my camera, so that when I'm looking up, my thumb is doing the focusing, so I press where I want to in the image to focus the camera, and then when I've got what I want, my index finger then clicks the shutter to get the composition that I want. So that's it for this tutorial on woodland photography. Hopefully you've picked up a few things here and there and see how I finally compose some of my other images. Although it's done in woodland, it might give you an idea as to how to really look at what it is that you're doing when you're composing your images on the back of your camera. Will there be more tutorials? There will be more tutorials. There's going to be a tutorial on a 10-stop ND filter very soon, as well as a few others. So make sure you click the subscribe button down there in the bottom right hand corner, and you'll get notification whenever it is that I upload any videos. So thanks very much to all of my subscribers. See you again soon.